He said that. There we go.
We're good, Matt?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Shiner. We can proceed with the opening exercises.
Very well. Well, we'll do the opening now. I'd like to call to order the Westmoreland Intermediate Unit Regular Board Meeting of January 26, 2021.
We can proceed with the
Okay, the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Christy, ready for a roll call for attendance?
Mr. Shiner,
Here.
Ms. Maines, Ms. Beveridge,
Here.
Ms. Bretz,
Here.
Ms. Callaway Rodriguez,
Here.
Ms. Sioka,
Present.
Mr. Feldbush,
Here.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Kendris, Mr. Leonard, Ms. Mock, Mr. Pekarsik,
Present.
Ms. Schmidt,
Present.
Mr. Schrock, Ms. Smith, Ms. Thomas,
Here.
Ms. Urban.
Here.
12 present, 5 absent.
Very well, thank you. Prior to our meeting this evening, there was an executive session in which contractual and personnel items were reviewed. Citizens' comments. There have been no comments received going into this evening's meeting. And so that gets us to approval of minutes. I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 24th, 2020 meeting.
So moved, Urban.
Second, Thomas.
Very well. Is there any comments on the minutes? If not, I'd like to take a voice vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. All right, we're going into financial reports. This is to approve items FR 2021 TAC 23 through FR 2021 TAC 30. Are there any items here that need to be pulled for further discussion? Okay, hearing none, we need a motion to approve.
So moved. Pekarsik.
And second,
Second.
is there any discussion on these items before we vote?
Mr. Shiner, if we could have Mrs. Liu just talk about, we have two, like FMB and then and PNC. Lynn, could you just share, what's going on, why we have two banks there?
Yeah, we switched our banks, our financial institutions mid of last year, in mid 2020. There were some outstanding checks that were clearing through PNC. And there were also, we had a lease through PNC for our former Act 39 project that we did with Schneider Electric several years ago, where we did work at the Clairview building and our building. That monthly lease was an automatic ACH payment. And they had recently, like shortly after we were transferring all of our funds, they had sold that portfolio of obligations to Huntington Bank. So we had to wait till Huntington Bank got set up to now withdraw from our FNB account. So all of the accounts at PNC were closed as of December. So from
Thank
now
you.
on, you'll just see First National Bank account information.
Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you, Lynn. If there's no further discussion, we have a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's reports and all of the items in this section. So therefore, we need a roll call vote.
Ms. Smains,
Yes.
Ms. Beveridge,
Yes.
Ms. Bratz,
Yes.
Ms. Callaway Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ms. Theoka,
Yes.
Mr. Feldbush,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Pekarsik,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Ms. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Shiner,
Yes.
12 yes, motions carried.
Very well, thank you. Next are board committee reports. As far as executive services go, it continues to be a challenging year for the intermediate unit, and I never cease to be amazed with how many things Dr. Conway finds himself involved with. The COVID virus has had a lot of our school districts in Westmoreland County communicating on a variety of numbers of comments, and Dr. Conway seems to be in the middle of it all the time. And I know it's not just Dr. Conway. That means our whole support staff, administration, they're all involved. And so I continue to want to thank them for dealing with this unusual year. But having said that, I think it's also noteworthy that the schools continue to seem to run. Lack of public comments for our recent meeting says to me that we don't have too many people upset that are wanting to come and deal with all that. So it's good to know that we're continuing to meet the goals of the education of our young folks, even in this very unusual time. And we've been navigating, providing some services to those in person, a few people who need it at Clairview, and while providing the education virtually to most of the others. So I just think it can't go without note that this is an important job and it's being handled well. And that's, there's a lot of other things. E-Academy, there's just so many challenges that the IU has been involved with. And for all those, I just wanted to acknowledge that good job's being done. All right, next item would be curriculum services. Ann Urban, are there any comments on curriculum services?
No, not tonight. No report.
Financial services, Bill Feldbush.
Nothing to report, thank you.
And student services, Sharon Mock. Okay, and technology and infrastructure services is Bill Leonard, and I know Bill's not here tonight. I know Gretchen is. Is there anything, Gretchen, that is worth mentioning here?
Nothing has been brought to my attention. Should there be?
I don't think so. We've been, we need to have some more committee meetings, and I think they're coming up next month. So there's a better chance we'll have something to talk about then. All right, now we're down to the executive director report. Dr. Conway.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. I appreciate the opportunity. So first, I want to, we need to recognize that this is Board Appreciation Month. And thank you so much for not only your service to your district, which has been such an unusual year, and the amount of time that you're taking at your district, then you have to come and serve the intermediate unit on its board. And we couldn't be more appreciative of your continued support of the intermediate unit. And to thank you, each of you are going to be receiving a gift that's going to be looks something like this, and Christy's going to be emailing it to everyone. It's a photo. It's the photos of all of the children that attend Clairview that are from your school district. And so Christy will be sending these. Glad you're part of our pack, our Wolf Pack documents to you. And Normally, when we're in person, we have something to give you in person. As you know, we couldn't do that this year, and we look to get back to that next year. So, on behalf of, thank you for all that you do, and thank and shout out to Colleen and her staff for creating them. So each district gets their own individual sheet there. And Christy, thank you ahead of time for sending that out to each of the board members. Second item on the executive director's report, we wanted to provide the board with a brief overview of student services and all the programs and the updates in light of the revised guidance for students and schools under substantial designation. We were able to begin in-person instruction in a hybrid fashion. And I asked Dr. Thomas to kind of give the board just a brief overview of the programs and where they currently stand. So Dr. Thomas, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Dr. Conway. Let's start at Clairview. Our Clairview school, of course, on 215 Donahoe Road, 2 doors down from the administration building. We're currently operating in person as of last Wednesday. We will continue in a hybrid model, whereas students will attend in person Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and will attend virtually on Wednesdays, very similar to school districts. Students have the choice to be also virtual if the family and the student so choose. All of our classrooms have webcams, and staff are using Google Classroom and Zoom as a methodology to connect. At our Greensburg partial location, which is actually a facility operated by Centerville Clinics, we have up to 30 students there. And in that particular facility, kids have the choice anywhere up to 5 days. Centerville makes the decision. Since it's their facility, we provide the instruction. So we do have students, again, there that are operating up to 5 days in person, and anything in between, also connecting virtually in some cases. In our early intervention program, which also has 3 of our 10 classrooms housed at Clairview, 4 classrooms housed at the Jeanette City School District McKee Elementary Building, sort of on the middle school side and on the lower level. And then we have Singleton classrooms at Kiski Upper Elementary, Greater Latrobe Elementary School, and West Newton Elementary School in the Yawk School District. That is a program where we service in total between speech and instruction around 1,400 students across the county. So in our classrooms, we have around 100 students, give or take, and those particular classrooms are either going to follow the district or follow, in the case of Clairview, our Clairview schedule. We anticipate that we will be making an announcement later this week on when they're going to return to in-person instruction in February. We just do not have our staff totally informed at this point, and we'll be making that recommendation soon and having conversations with staff. And then finally, to round out our classrooms at the Regional Youth Services Center. So this is behind Westmoreland Manor on 119 south of Greensburg. We operate 2 classrooms in the Youth Detention Center and 1 classroom in the youth shelter. And we also have itinerant instruction in the Westmoreland County Prison. All of these classrooms have been affected by the incarcerated population, or in the case of the shelter, kids in and out of the shelter have been a burden in terms of trying to manage and avoid cases. And so I should say we've had a few positive cases since Christmas, and we are waiting to see how the county numbers fare until we make a determination. All of those students in the 2 detention center classrooms and the shelter are receiving virtual instruction. We actually have large projection screens connected to a laptop. Our teachers log into Zoom every day. The county staff on site with mask up, they go into the classroom and then our teachers run the entire instructional day via Zoom for those students. So they're receiving instruction, but they are not in person with our teachers. At the prison still remains closed to our instructors. So believe it or not, the telephone and packets have been our way of doing that. The prison will not allow us to do Zoom instruction in real time, since there's a confidentiality issue at the Westmoreland County Prison. So with that in mind, the teacher that we have there works with students on GED programs and other programming in paper-based packet materials, and then also is doing a lot of phone calls and coordinating and doing instruction via phone, which is an interesting application. And then really the remaining classrooms that we have are somewhat sporadic. We operate 4 classrooms in Bell Vernon, which would follow the Bell Vernon Area School District. And then we have 1 learning support classroom in the Northern Westmoreland CTC building. Again, follows the Northern Westmoreland CTC. So hopefully that provides an overview of all of our programs and services.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Thomas. Really appreciate that overview of all of our different programs and their status. Third item on the executive director's report, wanted to just provide you an e-academy update from curriculum services. We're about to hit 2 milestones I'm sure Tim is going to be sharing with us. So Tim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Conway. Good evening, everybody. And yes, we did hit 2 very big milestones this past week in e-academy. The first of which is that we crossed the 3,000 student mark. So we now currently serve over 3,000. Actually, the number is 3,102 students as of today. The other landmark here is the number of course enrollments. We crossed over 20,000 course enrollments as of last week. We currently stand at about 20,212. When you consider the fact that that is about 4 times the highest number of course enrollments we've ever had in the program, that's a substantial number. And I think the most notable piece here is that our staff, those who are in this every day and are working hard to keep the program up and running, Becky Henderson, who is our distance learning coordinator, and all the staff at the IU, including our tech staff. There's been no additional staff, and we are running like a well-oiled machine on a daily basis, keeping those 20,000 course enrollments moving. The hundreds of teachers that we've trained, and the more than 100 teachers that are actively engaged on a daily basis teaching your students in your schools, putting in incredible amounts of time and effort. And one of the real telling signs for us is in the number of, or I should say the lack of, help desk requests that we have. With that number of people, or our help desk tickets on a weekly basis total maybe 30 or 40 on a week, which is really low. And they are typically very simple, straightforward questions about things, nothing that's very difficult as far as systems go. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that thanks to the effort of everybody at the IU who works hands-on with e-academy every day, we're making quite an impact locally. I think beyond, even when you look at the numbers that we just shared with you, something that kind of goes unseen and maybe not recognized is that over the past decade, we've trained hundreds of teachers in e-academy. I'm sure at this point it's well over 500 teachers that we've trained over the past couple of decades. Many of those teachers are not currently teaching an e-academy course, but they're teaching in a distance learning capacity in your schools, keeping those remote students going on a daily basis. So I like to think that we've had quite an impact on the capabilities of teachers in the distance learning realm here in Westmoreland County. I think we have some of the best teachers out there doing that job. And I would chalk that up to a lot of effort, again, from the IU, getting that training out there to teachers. Another thing that's worth mentioning is that we had kind of an unknown at the start of this school year with equipment needs and so on. We had a feeling we would have higher numbers than usual, and we knew we were short on equipment, and we had to take a risk and invest a considerable amount of money. As you may remember, back in September to kick the school year off. It was close to $250,000 in costs. I'm happy to report that all of that equipment is being utilized with only 10 machines sitting in reserve, which is our normal number. So every dollar that we spent went into use, and we kind of nailed it on the numbers, which we're happy about. So we feel good about the flow of things at this point. We have, again, I can't thank the staff enough. And I also would be remiss if I didn't thank you, the board, for supporting this very important program that we have and that we're involved in every day in your school districts. It does make a difference, and it is something that we're very proud of, and we thank you for all of the support that you give us. So thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit with you here this evening.
All right. Thank you very much, Tim. And thanks for sharing those two major milestones that we accomplished this past week. Last but not least, as part of the executive director's report, just a reminder, and Mr. Shiner kind of forecast it for us. We do have board committee meetings coming up on February 23rd. So the directors will be working with those committees and providing further updates and having some discussion topics for those committees to talk about. For the public that's watching, they are public meetings, and all the information to join them is on our website. So with that, Mr. Shiner, that concludes the executive director's report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Conway. There was an item D, preview of board operation guidelines. Did you want to cover something there?
Yeah, I did have that on there and I removed it. Basically, I just wanted to share with the board later in the agenda, there will be some board operations for their consideration in first reads, and it's part of our administrative regulations project and recognizing the operations of the board. And so tonight will be first reads, and then the board will vote on those operations in February.
All right, I'll just comment on the committee meetings that are coming up in February. Once again, please clear your schedules to be able to attend the committee meetings. We don't have committee meetings very often during the course of the year, so certainly would appreciate if you could make the committee meetings that you're part of for just prior to the February meeting next month. All right, moving on to WIU Foundation. I know Mr. Leonard's not here, and I think probably the only noteworthy item is that there is a foundation meeting scheduled for March 9th at 7:30 p.m. or 7:30 a.m. I'm sorry.
And I can share, Mr. Shiner, the foundation did meet on Tuesday, January 12th to talk about moving forward for the rest of the school year, as well as beginning to think about ideas for next year. We did decide to pause the Champion of Arts event that we normally have yearly because of the pandemic. So we did meet on the 12th. So that would be the update for the board.
Okay, very well. Thank you. We have no correspondence or old business to go over this evening. And so that gets us to Section 11 of the agenda, Human Resource Services. There are several motions in this section, including a new one that was added. And so that those items are HR 2021 TAC 35 through HR 2021 TAC 43. Are there any motions, or are there any items that should be pulled for further discussion? Okay, so hearing none, would like to request a motion and a second to approve these items.
So moved, Feldbush.
Second, Thomas.
Second, Callaway Rodriguez.
All right, thank you. It's been moved and seconded that these items be approved. Is there any discussion of these items before we vote? Okay, hearing no requests for discussion, Christie, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Beveridge,
Yes.
Ms. Bratz,
Yes.
Ms. Callaway Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mrs. Sioka,
Yes.
Mr. Feldbush,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Pekarsik,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Ms. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Shiner,
Yes.
Ms. Maines,
Yes.
12 yes, motion's carried.
Okay, thank you, Christy. There are no items under curriculum services, so that gets us to financial services. There are no items to vote on under financial services, but Ms. Liu is going to provide us with a presentation on this year's budget. So Lynn, you can go ahead and take it away on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scheinert. Dr. Conway is going to share a couple of things real quick. I will reference the narrative that you have. It is a PDF file, but it's called the Operating Budget 21-22. It was in the packet if you have it. I'm also going to be sharing a short PowerPoint presentation, which is the third tab over. But before I do get started, because we have some new board members, I just want to take a couple of minutes and kind of share what's different about an IU versus school districts and get you some basic information around our financials. So the things that are different about an IU versus a school district, number one, our general fund accounts for all financials except for those that are specifically required by law to be accounted for in another fund. The general operating budget is a portion of that general fund. So when you get the financial statements presented by Deluzio on the February meeting, they'll talk a lot about the funds that we have. The other three funds that we have are unique to IUs. They're the Special Education Fund, the Special Education Transportation Fund, and the State-Funded Early Intervention Program. The next slide. Our fund balance, we have fund balances just very similar to your districts. Restricted funds are those that are constrained by external parties or legislation. We have a small amount of restricted fund balance, which you'll see in the PowerPoint that I'll show you shortly. And we have a committed fund balance. Those were amounts that are constrained by the board for things like debt service or construction. We have assigned fund balance, which is intended to be used for specific purposes. And we do have some assigned fund balances that are used for shortfalls in any programs of special education needs. And then unassigned fund balance is not restrained and it's available for use. The IU revenues and other financing sources are very different from a district. We have no taxing authority. And the state subsidy that used to exist that supported IU ceased in the 2009-2010 school year. Our revenues are generated by a variety of sources. Local income that we receive are things like interest that we earn on our banking activity and investments, rental income, services that are provided such as e-academy, ESL, second language, and technology type of services that are sold. We receive state revenue by Social Security and retirement reimbursements. We also have state funds that we receive for PDE statewide system of support grants. PDE provides IUs with a scope of work to do with districts. And it's easier for them to deal with 29 IUs than it is with 500 school districts. So there's a portion of that scope of work is statewide system support grants that is state funded, and then there's a portion that's federally funded. And then our miscellaneous and other income is indirect costs that were allowed on certain programs. We have some money that comes in from a core, special education core fund, and then the member district contributions, which come from your own school districts. Our expenditures and other financing sources, the majority of ours are salary and benefits. There's also travel and supplies, and then contractual obligations that we have related to facility related things, services on our building, on Clairview School, since we have that 20-year lease. And then we do have a lot of estimates and assumptions for items which are very unpredictable in nature. Even the timing of some of our revenues are not known when we're developing this in December and January. Things like the statewide system of support grants, we don't know from PDE until probably the earliest is normally August, July or August, but sometimes it's as late as October to December of the school year that we're in till we find out what that scope of work is and what the funds are we're going to receive. So we tend to use the amounts that we've gotten in the current year as an indication of what they're going to be doing. Also, technology revenue, Eric will tell you, there's a lot of times that he doesn't have contracts until later in the spring. He doesn't know what all the districts are going to need. And the other outlying areas, things for like fraud, the fraud application that we use, that we get revenue for, he doesn't always have those contracts this early. So those things are also estimated. Okay. So go ahead and just next one. Thank you. Our budget timeline, I sent out the preliminary budget to the superintendents and business managers last Monday, the 18th, for them to review. And then we did a joint presentation to them on Wednesday, the 20th. Very similar to what I'm doing with you tonight. I highlighted significant changes both in revenues and expenditures, increases and decreases, as well as the assumptions that we used in putting the budget together. Obviously, it's being presented to you now. You'll be voted on at the February board meeting. The hope is that it gets to the districts to vote on in March, because some of the districts don't have board meetings until late in the month. And if it waits till April, my deadline to submit the budget and the proportionate vote count is May 1st. So we do ask, if at all possible, that it be on your March board agendas. And Christy will be sending, once our board votes, Christy will send that out to the member districts for them to get on their agendas. The assumptions that we made, the budget format, it's the same organizational structure that we've had with 4 divisions in the general operating budget: the executive services, which includes HR, financial services, technology and infrastructure services, and curriculum services. The student services budget is not part of this. It's part of that special education fund that I spoke of earlier. We do have in this budget, which is similar to the past 3 years, the revenue and expenditures associated to the Clairview School lease. We have rent, taxes, and utilities associated to that building. We're in year 6 of a 20-year lease. And in the last several years, 3 years ago, we put it into the general operating budget, the revenues and expenditures. The programs that operate out of that building pay rent based on square footage usage. So the Clairview school programs, all 4 of those programs for Clairview, and the early intervention course classes rooms that are in there pay rent back to the general operating budget. Similarly, those expenditures are in ours. So in the past several years, we've had shortfalls based upon vacant classrooms. This year, we have no shortfall. So there's all the classrooms that are there are being used. The budget assumptions for the directors, first of all, the executive director and financial services director and HR administrator are budgeted per approved contracts with the board. Act 93 salaries were budgeted at the employee's current salary plus a proposed 1.7% increase, which is based on PSBA's market. The support staff increases are budgeted at the hourly increase of 55 cents per hour per their CBA. I forgot the per hour there, so I apologize. Medical benefits, we did budget an increase of 6% in medical and 2.5% in dental. No increase in vision because our renewal rate at this point is good through June of 2022. The medical benefits over the last 4 years that I've done the general operating budget, we were doing a 4-year average and it was much lower. But last year we did see a 5.2% increase in the 1 year. We're not knowing what's going to happen. I just used a 6% increase. The employee benefit elections for everyone has been updated to reflect any changes that they've elected in coverage. And then the PSER's actual rate for 21-22 recently communicated of 34.94% is used as well. I am going to go through some of the highlights as far as the significant changes real quick so that I can share with you what has changed. I apologize, Dr. Conway, was there one more slide? Staffing assumptions, I apologize. Let's go ahead for the staffing assumptions. There are no changes in staffing. There was a head count of 30 in the general operating budget. It's still 30. The only difference is there is an allocation, a lower allocation for the general operating budget due to some folks being, or some of the staff being allocated to Clairview. So there's 30 head count and 28.25 FTEs in the general operating budget. Sorry, now I will go on to my increases and decreases. If you refer to the general operating budget 21-22 document that you have on page 3, it starts to explain the differences, especially in revenue. And there are reference numbers. If you looked at pages 6 and 7, which are the revenue items in that packet. The first item is item number 2. We are projecting rental income to be lower due to decreased use of our facilities. While we have some tenants who use our facility, throughout the entire year, we also have entities that come and use our facility just to use the meeting rooms, things like the PA Bar Association. That obviously has ceased since we've been closed. And while we think it's going to increase, we don't think it's going to ramp up as quickly as it might have been in the past. With curriculum, the increases and decreases that we're seeing, increases in revenues for curriculum on item 4 are related to CPE workshops and are associated to an increase in expenses that are tied to page 11 that are professional services other. The increases in ESL revenues are related to 2 things. There's an increased demand for services, as well as we're providing additional services beyond teacher instruction. There are things like professional development and for the development of the teachers themselves that are being provided by the IU. So that's associated increases in expenses. We did add a 14th ESL teacher, and those costs are paralleled on page 12 under ESL. The decrease in revenues for miscellaneous initiatives and grants are just based upon estimates and what we're seeing this year. We did have some grants through Chester County last year that we're not seeing again. So we know that those are going away, and we didn't want to project them too high. Under technology and infrastructure, referencing line items 10, 13, and 15, respectively, the increase in networking services is based upon an increased demand for support services from our staff. The increases in technology resale is based upon resale services, additional ones that we've taken on, and there are associated increases in expenses for technology supplies resale on page 10. The increase in program revenue, as I mentioned, with Clairview is that where there's no vacant classrooms in Clairview, therefore there's no projected shortfall. And the items on page 10 that would be the utilities for Clairview and the rent and taxes would match the $384,000 and change of revenue. Reference item number 16 under finance, we do project a small increase in service revenue. We had a district reach out to us. They have a short-term personnel need. Someone is taking off a leave during the summer. So they have asked us if we will cover payroll services for that short-term period. We do expect a small decrease in core money. The core funds are used to cover things like Dr. Thomas's salary and benefits, his direct secretary salary and benefits, some access secretaries who do billing on behalf of school-age students. We also have several of the supervisors in special education that fall under that budget, as well as some of the costs related to itinerant services, because some of those itinerant services, in order for those hourly rates to stay competitive and be able to compete with things like the School for the Deaf and the School for the Blind, we absorb some of those costs for those itinerant services in the core budget to try to keep our services competitive for our districts. The retirement subsidy on line 22, reference to line 22, is just an increase driven by the increase in retirement costs. So on average, we receive 54% of our PSERS money back. Referencing 23 and 24 is the statewide system of support, the state and federal pieces. There is an overall estimated increase in funding for these projects based upon the work that's been assigned this year to us. Each IU has individual grants, as I mentioned earlier, that define the statement of work to be completed and the funding amounts. And again, that's typically not known until the end of the school year, but we did see a $60,000 overall increase between those two components of state and federal. Line 25, the district general operating contribution, it's the balancing piece of the budget, and it remains steady compared to last year. Those specific items for your district are referenced on page 5, which is the district contribution schedule. The things that make those swings happen between I'll say a couple $100 one way or the other compared to last year, is that we update the market value aid ratio and the weighted ADMs. We get that off of PDE site and update that for the current year. Indirect costs, we do anticipate a decrease in that based upon notification from PDE, and it's roughly a year lag from when it's estimated to when we actually receive notification. And then last year we did do, if you recall, we had a one-time use of some fund balance to balance our budget last year. With respect to proposed expenditures, again, I highlight significant changes other than those that were mentioned in conjunction with revenue highlights above. On page 8, under executive services, you'll see that there's an increase in tuition reimbursement for both non-instructional certified and non-instructional non-certified staff. And that's basically our support staff and our Act 93 staff have tuition reimbursement benefits in their contract and plan, respectively. So we've had folks who have already expressed the interest and we'll start taking advantage of those. So we've budgeted for that for next year. Also, there's an increase in professional services on page 9 under Financial Services Division, and that's to cover a 1-month overlap for training with my impending retirement at the end of the fiscal 21-22 fiscal year. On page 10, there is a budgeted decrease in insurance other, and that is reflective of reductions that we have seen over the past year. And then reductions in equipment, the decrease in equipment on page 10 also is under technology, is attributable to the establishment of or our recommendation to establish a capital project fund and anticipating committing fund balance to be used for ongoing technology needs that would support our employees as well as our students. So I'll get into that at the next item. The decrease in E-Academy for communications expense is actually reflective of an actual savings that we experienced this year. Eric was able to switch vendors for the remote connectivity for the E-Academy equipment. And it was a savings of $45,000. So that is an actual savings that we know will continue. Also, that E-Academy equipment is, again, we attributed a significant purchase in 2021 of new equipment for E-Academy use. So we're not anticipating a substantial need again next year. Overall, the 21-22 budget reflects an increase of 1.7%, with the vast majority of that attributable to salary and benefit costs. Dr. Conway, if you'll go to the, that one again, thank you. I do want to cover the audited revenues and expenditures. And again, you're going to get more information next month at the meeting when Deluzio is here and presents the audit. But I've provided the last 2 years audited financial statements summary. We started out this year, the 2019-20 year, with a fund balance, unassigned fund balance of $3.4 million. We had revenues and other financing sources of $6.1 million and expenditures and other financing uses of almost $6 million. So the net gain is $121,277 in 1920. So our unassigned fund balance currently is at $3.5 million. If you remember back in February of last year when this was being presented, or when it was being voted on and the audit was presented, that year we had $719,000 of excess revenue. That was very much attributed, probably $580,000 of that was attributed to E-Academy growth and ESL services revenue growth. And we were talking to the board. I had a presentation for the finance committee at that point, put together a preliminary 5-year capital plan, and knew we had different things that needed to be done based upon the RVAT assessment that was done in 2018-19. So we were looking to potentially commit this $719,000 of fund balance to use toward a capital project plan. And then COVID hit, because when we were talking about that in February, I had it on the March board agenda to talk about committing those funds. When COVID hit, I shared with the executive committee that I was hesitant to ask the board to commit those funds at that point in time, not knowing what COVID was going to do to us financially. We didn't know what type of grants would come to the IU. We didn't know what type of additional expenditures we might incur. So we held off committing that $719,000 at that point in time. Here that we are, while we're still in the pandemic, we know that we didn't have to utilize those funds, and we ended up with a small gain of the $121,000 at the end of 1920 in our general fund. So if you go to the next slide. So our fund balance overall, we still have a small restricted fund balance of just under $19,000. This is comprised of 3 different things. There is an autistic program support in there. There's a library fund, and there's also Principals Academy funds in there. The committed fund balance was established actually quite a long time ago, and then was added to when we did the Act 39 project. So the $153,000 net change you see there is the amount that we pay every month toward the Act 39 project that was done in 2018-19. That work was done at our building, our administration building, with the roof and lighting fixtures, and then it was also done at Clairview School. We still have several years left on that, and it, like I said, it's $153,000 a year of debt service. So that committed fund balance of remaining of $957,000, it covers the vast majority of the years that are left on that lease, but it is committed to use either for debt service or for capital project needs. The assigned fund balance started out at $239,000, and we had $14,000 added to it. So we have a net balance there of $253,000. Again, this is fund balance that was accumulated over the years from medical medical excess claiming that we get. It's just an amount of money. We did check with the Department of Human Services after I had gotten here just to find out what we should be using those funds for. They basically said that they would like them to be used in line with things that were, medical access funds are able to be used for. However, they're just a payment to us for doing medical access claiming. So we can utilize it for anything. What we had done is we assigned that fund balance to be used for program shortfalls. And if you recall 2 years, for those of you who were here 2 years ago, we did have a program shortfall in Clairview when we did have a reduction in students that were enrolled there of about 20% or 13%, sorry. So we used almost $400,000 of that fund balance at that point in time. The unassigned fund balance, as I mentioned again, it's at $3.5 million. So our total balance, when you see this on the Deluzio statements next month, the whole combined fund balance is $4,760,000. The next slide, thank you. And just a budget to actual comparison for 1920, revenues were budgeted at $6,044,000. It came in at $6,103,000. So just about $59,000 higher than projected, which is 1%. The expenses by division, you can see those changes there. The change in curriculum was attributable to, again, growth in E-Academy, and the technology and infrastructure changes were things that we were able to allocate toward programs that sometimes we don't have a chance to. Early intervention program, the state allocation can be used for things that are like software licensing and things like that, that the personnel assigned to that program use. However, when we budget for that program, there typically isn't any excess to be able to use for those costs. It's not until we do a reconciliation at year end that we take a look and see what revenues we have in early intervention and what costs we have. And we were able to get some of those costs recaptured from the general op. So overall, there was a savings of almost $62,000 in costs that weren't expended that we budgeted for, and then the $59,000 increase in revenue for the overall $121,000 net surplus. Broken down just by type of revenue, local, state, federal, and other. The big difference I'll show you here in the federal revenue is just that statewide system of support money that is being budgeted for. It had a big significant swing of the $60,000 increase. A lot of that was swung from state money to federal money by PDE. Our proposed expenditures, the changes mostly here under the executive services. I think when I pointed out the changes that were highlighted in the expenditure realm, we do have the $10,000 of tuition reimbursement that falls under tuition or under executive services because it's under HR. It's where it needs to be reported by PDE for PDE. Also, Dr. Conway's contract is at 2.5%. The Act 93 staff is 1.7% increase, as I mentioned. And then we did budget, as I mentioned, to the increase in medical for that. Under finance, again, the big change there of the 5% is that we budgeted for the 1 month overlap of for replacing me, and then changes in in some of the staff's benefit elections. So overall, again, it's $115,585 increase in the budget at 1.7%. The member district contributions, just from a historic perspective, I know we have it elsewhere that goes back to like 1990 something. I didn't think that you needed all that detail. I think the highest, Dr. Conway, I recall it being was about 19% of the overall general operating budget at one point in time that the member contributions covered.
That would be correct.
Yeah, so we're still in this under 3% in total. Okay, that's it. Is there any questions?
Peasers. Let's talk about Peasers for a minute.
Okay.
Are we anywhere close to being able to like level off and see any, I don't know, any savings at any point with Peasers ever?
No, I think they're still projecting the increases for, I think it's 2 or 3 more years. They're projecting that it's going to plateau. So no, I think their increase this year was a slightly lower than what they originally projected, 3.94%. But I think it's supposed to get up as high as either 35 or 36, close to 36 before it would taper off. Again, fortunately, we do get 54% of that back. And the reason that we get 54% is that it's employees hired prior to a certain year, you get 50%. And then newer employees, it's a higher percent. So the fact that we have more newer employees than we do aged employees, our blended average is 54%. Okay. Any other questions? Like I said, this is just presented tonight. It'll be up for vote at February. If at any point in time between now and the February meeting, if you want to, give me a call and have me go through anything, I will certainly be more than willing to do that. I have more details behind all of these numbers. And one of the things that I do want to point out that I didn't initially while I was going through this, and I did share it with the superintendents and business managers, is you'll see that we did not project any increase in either the revenue or the costs associated to E-Academy, except for that decrease that I mentioned in the communications. And the reason for that is that, while this year is an anomaly, we had that 400% increase in the enrollments and the growth. We do think, and talking with Tim and Becky, we do think that there's going to be a reset to some sense of normalcy for E-Academy. And what we really budgeted at was where we would have ended up last year had COVID not happened. So we've budgeted for 4,850 enrollments, which is just under the 5,000 mark. That $900,000 in teacher, which is roughly $900,000 in teachers' salaries, plus the employer costs associated to that, which is the Social Security, retirement, unemployment comp, and workers' comp. And then the revenue associated to that for $1.5 million. We feel that is where we think that at least we can safely say that's where we thought we would be had COVID not happened. So we're budgeting that conservatively. The thing that I can tell you is that it's a blend. I've been asked numerous times, how do we budget for E-Academy? E-Academy revenue is twofold. We get expenses, sorry. The expenses are twofold. We have expenses to teachers for full year courses, and we have expenses to teachers for per semester courses. The revenue is fourfold. We have in consortium, out of consortium, per semester, and full year. So what we've done is we've looked at that 1920 selection or course mix. We had 55% of the courses that were year-long courses and 45% were per semester courses. And 80% were in consortium, 20% were out of consortium. So that's how we came up with those numbers as in projecting both the cost for the teachers and the revenue side for the tuition. And that's what we're using for 21-22 until we have better information. The thing that I mentioned to the superintendents and business managers is that while we've had an explosion in the academy, in the revenue side, certainly, and also in the expenses, as Tim mentioned, $500,000 in equipment that we needed to garner, we're going to see where this year ends up. There could be an excess of revenue because of the explosion we've had in the academy. If that happens, we would be looking to reinvest it in the program, commit funds, consider rebates, prorated rebates to districts. We have a litany of things that we can look at, but we need to see how the year plays out.
And Lynn, when would we know that? Not until mid-July, when all of the bills have been paid and courses completed?
I would say late July, only because of processing payments to third-party vendors that we use. It would be late July before we would know for sure.
So we just have to stay patient and encourage our business managers and superintendents to be patient and let this year run its course. And then we can see where we end up specifically with any excess revenue from E-Academy.
Absolutely. But again, we didn't feel it was prudent to try to project this continued pattern into 21, 22. As Tim will share, as Tim would share with you too, he knows from districts that they're trying to, figure out ways to do more of their own or not have to utilize the service. Not that they don't want to because it's not good. It's just because they want to be able to try to contain their costs. So there could be different models even in what we're being offering. So again, it was just, there were too many unknowns to try to say that we're going to project an increase.
Thank you, Lynn.
You're welcome.
I'd like to comment that I really like seeing that the contribution we're requesting from member districts is pretty stabilized this year. It's very small, either pluses or minuses, but overall, none of them are particularly substantial. But last year, that wasn't the case. We did want more of a contribution because of a variety of factors. This year, when we got into the pandemic, it would have suggested that, boy, maybe a lot of those numbers could change. But it's really remarkable that the Academy has done what it's done. What I don't know, and you touched on it, was what happens with the Academy in the future. If we go back to something we call more normal, would that involve less enrollments in E-Academy? So I guess we're going to have to bear that in mind as we move into the future. But the other thing that strikes me about the budget is the Clairview School has no empty classrooms. They're all being used. And that's another good piece of information financially. But I guess it points out a need for the kind of service that's being provided at Clairview School. So that's helped us on the financial side as well. So, I'm glad we're going to have a pretty stable year in spite of some of the challenges that we faced this year. But I guess until it settles down next year, we'll have to see where we end up there. So hopefully we don't have to pay the piper next year because we had a reasonably stable year this year.
Agreed.
But tremendous amount of detail, and you do a marvelous job of trying to pull all of this together. And I don't know until we get the results of the audit next month, but it's always been a good result from the auditor, and I'm expecting no less this year.
Well, and I have to thank the division directors and Dr. Conway, because I can't do this without them, including Dr. Thomas. We talk a lot about those core programs and the things that need to go in that core budget before I start anything else. So I thank all four of them tremendously for their help.
Well, I know you need the team to do what it always does, but you're an integral part, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. So referencing the fact that I talked about the capital needs, I know this was shared with the Finance Committee. You want me to share my screen, Dr. Conway, or do you just want to pull it up?
I have it up right now, Lynn.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So this was shared with the Finance Committee before in last January, February timeframe. There were several things that have been updated a little bit because when I first shared this 5-year capital projection, we had in here a bollard project both at Clairview School and the administration building. And those bollards were part of the 1819 RVAT assessment recommendation. We were able to garner a second security enhancement grant from PCCD last year. And the bollards were included in that. So we got notice of that back in what, October? No, maybe July. I can't remember time frame, Dr. Conway, but
I believe it was July.
yeah, we did
Yes.
receive notice of that grant being approved. So I pulled the Bullard projects out of here. And there were some other things that have come in its place. One of the things that you'll see here, and again, this is not for like approval per line item kind of a thing. What I'm thinking of is when we would suggest that we commit the fund balance, which is $840,630, which is the gains over the last 2 years, both the 18-19 gain of $719,353 and the gain in 19-20 of $121,277. Those two amounts, what we would suggest is that the board commit those funds toward future capital projects related to the 5-year capital plan, so that these kinds of things could be done from those excess revenues. Again, you'll see a lot of this stuff that's on here are things from an 18-19 RVAT assessment that was done. There are safety concerns. I know Dr. Conway and Dr. Thomas shared the classroom doors, the thin, hollow doors that are there. That parking lot over there needs completely milled and resurfaced. There is a fire alarm system replacement for our admin building. Windows replaced at Clairview, again, just because of the type of windows that they are. There are some other things that have been added in here too. This Rtu UV upgrade. I think Eric and Matt could talk about this a little bit more. It may not necessarily be not a UV upgrade. It might be something else, but these are to help the air circulations in both buildings to filter out germs. So you can certainly take a look at this. We'll talk about it more at next month's committee meeting as well, and refine it. It's not per se to be, carte blanche just approved as it is. There's a lot of work that still needs to go into these projects, but it's the concepts behind them that we'd be looking for committing those funds. You'll see there each year of the 5 years we have technology needs replacement, which is for the employees and the students that I mentioned. So we would have a rotating cycle of being able to do that.
And thank you, Lynn and Eric and the team for putting this together, because what we want to get away from is the reactionary purchases and the reactionary things that we have to fix. We see in the future the things that have to be done over the next 5 years. Some of these things, for instance, technology becomes a cycle. So we don't have these large purchases 1 year that kind of takes us off balance from year to year. So we're just trying to be proactive. And so there's less of a burden on the districts from year to year when doing these capital projects that we know are going to be needed, over the next several years.
I think that's wise. We've got to keep our eye on the future, or else it will come and bite us, and we will have those reactionary costs if we don't. So I'm glad you shared that with us, and we'll understand and we'll be anticipating when we need to commit funds.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Guess now we can move on to item 14 on the agenda, student services. In this section, we have items SS 2021 TAC 25 through SS 2021 TAC 29. Are there any items here that you would like to pull for separate consideration? Hearing none, I need a motion and a second to approve the items in this section.
So moved, Thomas.
Second, Urban.
Very well, thank you. You now have a motion and a second to approve items 25 through 29 in this section. Any further discussion? Okay, since there's no further discussion, I'd like to request the roll call vote, please, Christy.
Mrs. Bretz,
Yes.
Ms. Callaway Rodriguez,
Yes.
Miss Sioka,
Yes.
Mr. Feldbush,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Pekarsik,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Ms. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Shiner,
Yes.
Ms. Maines,
Yes.
Ms. Beveridge.
Yes.
12 yes, motions carried.
Very well. Move over now to section 15, technology and infrastructure services. In this section, we have items TIS 2021 TAC 6 through TIS 2021 TAC 8. Are there any items here that board members would like to pull for separate consideration? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to have a motion and a second to approve items 6 through 8 in this section.
So moved, McCarson.
Maines.
Second, Schmidt.
Very well. Is there any further discussion on these items? If not, again, Christie, we need a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Callaway Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ms. Sioka,
Yes.
Mr. Feldbush,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Pekarsik,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Ms. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Shiner,
Yes.
Ms. Maines,
Yes.
Ms. Beveridge,
Yes.
Ms. Spretz.
Yes.
12 yes, motions carried.
Very well, thank you. And moving on to section 16 on school board. Here we have items of SB 2021 TAC 30 through SB 2021 TAC 35. Are there any items here that any board members would like to pull for separate consideration? Okay. Hearing none, I need a motion and a second to approve items 30 through 35 in this section.
So move Sioka.
Second, Feldbush.
Is there any further discussion on any of these items? Okay, hearing no further discussion, we need a roll call vote, please, Christie.
Mrs. Sioka,
Yes.
Mr. Feldbush,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Pekarsik,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Ms. Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Shiner,
Yes?
Ms. Maines,
Yes.
Ms. Beveridge,
Yes.
Ms. Bretz,
Yes.
Ms. Callaway Rodriguez.
Yes.
12 yes, motions carried.
Very well, thank you. And now we can move on to section 17. These are board policy first readings. There are a number of policies here that are in the category of first readings, and they fall under SB 2021 TAC 36 through SB 2021 TAC 38. We won't be voting on these tonight since they're first reading items, but I would like to open it up to any questions that anybody might have on any of these policies. Okay, I don't hear any requests for questions. So that's where we can move on to section 18. Section 18 deals with board operations. These are guidelines that in essence amplify or provide additional information or requirements or guidance beyond our policies. And there are a number of them that are on the agenda tonight. They are specifically items SB 2021 TAC 39, all the way through SB 2021 TAC 48. I know there's quite a bit of information there when I was looking through them before the meeting. And does anybody have any questions or have any discussion points to raise on these board operating guidelines? Okay, I guess there are none. So then we can move on to comments by citizens on non-agenda items. We did not receive any comments, so I don't have anything further there. And so I'll open it up to any comments by any members of our board. Anything you want to raise or questions? Okay, if not, I need a motion and a second for adjournment.
So moved, Urban.
Second.
Callaway Rodriguez.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, meeting's adjourned.